On April 1970, three astronauts strapped themselves into the Apollo 13 spacecraft atop the mighty Saturn V rocket bound for the moon. This was supposed to be NASA's third moon landing mission, and much like the first two missions, Apollo 11 and 12, it was gonna be a piece of cake. During the first couple days of the flight, everything appeared to be going according to plan. But during a routine system check, an explosion rocked the spacecraft. Oxygen started pouring out of a ruptured tank, and the command module began to slowly lose pressure. Apollo 13 was now a drifting tomb, condemned to wander the cold void of space until it burned up in the Earth's atmosphere. The crew now needed to make their lunar lander, which was only supposed to be used for moon landings, their new command module, and find a way to make it work. But could these three astronauts really pull off such a stunt? Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Haise did pull off one of the most extraordinary feats of space travel ever seen. But just how exactly did they manage to survive? And what lessons can we learn from this extraordinary mission? All right, let's get started. On April 16, 1970, the astronauts of Apollo 13 lifted off from Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The trio had gone through months of grueling physical and psychological tests and hours upon hours of simulator training just to make it to this moment. They knew that if all went according to plan, they would become the third crew in history to walk on the moon. With an escort of hundreds of cameras, they made their way to the pad and climbed aboard the Apollo 13 command and service module. Once strapped in and suited up, it was time to fly. At 13:30 Eastern Time, the engines ignited and Apollo 13 lifted off. The three astronauts quickly passed through the atmosphere and headed out into deep space. For a few days, the crew checked out the various systems on board and conducted experiments while hurtling towards the moon at about 25,000 miles per hour. Everything seemed to be going perfectly. That is, until April 1970. During a routine system check on the service module, Jack Swigert was asked by Mission Control to stir the oxygen tanks to make sure the liquid oxygen had properly mixed with the nitrogen. A few moments after he reported back that the mixing was complete, an explosion erupted in the oxygen tank. Immediately, alarms blared throughout the spacecraft and red warning lights filled the cabin. As they struggled to understand what happened, they realized that their command module was oxygen was literally pouring out of a hole in the side of the tank. The astronauts quickly sealed off the affected section of the spacecraft, but they were now critically low on oxygen. They needed to find a way to fix the damage or come up with a new plan. In Houston, technicians worked feverishly to figure out a solution. After analyzing data and checking schematics, they figured out that the only way to save the crew was to abandon the command module and transfer to the lunar module. Now, this presented many problems. For one, the lunar module was only meant to carry 2 people, not 3. This meant that the astronauts would have to huddle together in a cramped cabin barely bigger than a phone booth for the rest of the mission. Secondly, the lunar module didn't have enough oxygen or water to sustain 3 people for the entire trip home. Finally, there was no guarantee that the lunar module systems would function properly in free space, much less sustain a life for 3 people. But it was their best chance, so the astronauts prepared to abandon ship. As they donned their bulky spacesuits, they attached themselves to the lunar module and prepared for departure. The lunar module detached from the command module and began to slowly drift away. With dwindling oxygen supplies and temperatures plummeting inside the cramped cabin, the astronauts rushed to finish their transfer. Once safely inside the lunar module, the astronauts wasted no time getting started on their improvised lifeboat. Swigert turned on the cabin heater, which also doubled as a carbon dioxide scrubber. Meanwhile, Lovell began checking the electrical systems. Haise got to work preparing food and figuring out a way to ration their water supply. As soon as they had things under control, the astronauts prepared to fire up the lunar module's descent engine and set course for the moon. Meanwhile, in Houston, The teams on the ground worked around the clock to figure out a way to help the astronauts. They managed to convince the astronauts to turn the lunar module's ascent engine towards the sun, which allowed solar panels to begin generating power. However, even with these measures in place, the lunar module still wasn't equipped to support 3 people for the entire mission. Each astronaut only had enough food for 2 days, and only enough water for 1. To make matters worse, one of the fans that circulated air through the cabin failed, meaning that the astronauts had to manually rotate the air tanks to keep the air breathable. But despite these setbacks, the astronauts were still able to enjoy some semblance of comfort thanks to an unexpected source: cheese. Apparently, the packaging of the freeze-dried meals created a pocket of air that the astronauts could use to inflate their suits to become more comfortable. An added bonus was that this extra air made the suits appear larger, giving the astronauts more range of motion. Additionally, the astronauts were able to conserve energy by having 1 person work at a time, while the other 2 rested, ate, and relaxed. By taking turns, they were able to make their supplies last. But now a new problem had emerged. The astronauts had to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, and if their heat shield was damaged in any way, the intense heat would kill them. The lunar module wasn't equipped with a heat shield. In fact, it wasn't even designed to re-enter the atmosphere. The astronauts were now in a race against time. They had to figure out how to steer the module and hope that it would survive. When the lunar module finally approached Earth, the world watched with bated breath as it began its descent. The craft was met with a thick blanket of clouds and disappeared from view. As the world waited, the astronauts braced for impact. Minutes later, cheers erupted as the world witnessed a successful splashdown of Apollo. After spending 4 days in their cramped lunar module, the astronauts were reunited with their families. Jim Lovell was greeted by his wife, Marilyn, and their 3 children. Meanwhile, Fred Haise was met by his wife, Wanda, and their 2 sons. As for Jack Swigert, he was given a hero's welcome in Denver. He took the time to thank everyone who supported him, stating, "I want to say one thing to everybody. All of us on Apollo 13, whether we're here or in hospitals, are truly blessed by your concern and prayers." President Richard Nixon wanted to personally congratulate the astronauts on their return. He invited them to the White House, where they were greeted by hundreds of onlookers. The president shook each astronaut's hand and thanked them for their bravery. He stated, "Men, you brought home to all of us the meaning of our national credo, that the American spirit will never be subdued, that the will to live and the will to win will see us through." So what exactly went wrong with Apollo 13? Turns out a faulty wire caused an oxygen tank to explode. This was due to a combination of excessive vibration and electrical activity in the tank. While this was serious enough to cancel the mission, it actually helped NASA improve future missions. By learning from this failure, NASA was able to refine the safety protocols and spacecraft design. This led to many successful missions, including Apollo 15, 16, and 17, which landed the first astronauts on the moon's surface. If you think about it, Apollo 13 was a perfect example of a mission that should have ended in tragedy but didn't. Despite being critically low on resources and having a damaged spacecraft, the astronauts were able to make it home safely. This was thanks to the combined efforts of the astronauts, ground crew, and NASA engineers. Everyone involved did their part to ensure the astronauts returned home safely. Apollo 13 was not just a mission, it was a testament to human resilience and innovation. The astronauts were able to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles and return home safely. This is a lesson that we can all take to heart no matter what challenges we may face. With determination and hard work, we can achieve anything. Thank you so much for watching. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on any new videos. Until next time, keep looking up.